It's that time of year. College football is right around the corner. Training camp starts for UConn football tomorrow. We're going to preview. I've got a guest. This is Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On UConn. I am your host, Matt Schonvisky. On tonight's show, we are live. We're going to be taking Q&A. So any live listeners that want to talk UConn football, UConn basketball, conference realignment, you name it, anything UConn Huskies, I'm going to be here as long as you guys are, and we'll take all your questions, and I'll provide as many answers as possible. Middle of today's show, we're going to be talking about UConn defense. We're doing basically a preview of what to expect this camp ahead of the season opener. Middle of today's show will be focused on defense and Ryan Manilak. But first, we are starting with the offense. Quarterback, no surprise, going to be a huge competition, a battle there. Wide receiver, running back, offensive line. You name the position, there's competition across the board, and that's what makes teams better. We're going to talk about that in a sec. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And we see people coming in. I see some live listeners, so appreciate you hopping in and joining. Again, focused on UConn football, first two segments, offensive preview, defensive preview. Then we'll get into your questions and answers. But please feel free, fire in comments, and we'll read through. Even if you send something in now, we're going to start from the top once we get into questions. And I also want to pull in a guest for tonight. We've got Bobby Wilson of the TNT College Football Podcast. Bobby, I know you are just as hyped as I am. I know you've been doing previews for across the country, not just focused on UConn, but everybody knows you as the also doing UConn specific podcasts throughout the season. So definitely thank you for taking some time today. I know it was the very last minute to get you on here, so I appreciate you hopping in. And yeah, I want to make this as interactive as possible with you as well as all the listeners as well. So thanks for hopping in.
Absolutely. Any chance I can have to talk UConn football, I'm there.
All right. So we are less than 24 hours from UConn at least getting underway. I know there's some other schools out there that already are underway from a camp perspective. Just what's going through your mind as college football is basically here?
Well, I put on my coaching hat for a second, and I just think, man, it's a start. I mean, the years it never stops, obviously, especially at the Division I level. But at the same time, like, it's here, and you're ready to hit the ground running. And I know the players have to be excited. I remember my first rodeo as a student athlete. Just you get those butterflies inside, and you know that you've been working for this, but at the same time, like it's really here. It's just a great opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you mentioned butterflies going. Everything, anytime you enter something new, it's always that excitement level. You think you know what you have as a head coach. You really don't truly know until once you get into the thick of it. But camp, 25 practices, including scrimmages. This time is going to be so critical between now and September 5th when UConn kicks off against Lafayette at the Rent. So many new players. I think it's 66 new players from a transfer standpoint. A number from Toledo, 20 plus, and then a number from the transfer portal. Plus, you add in the true freshmen and the returnees from UConn. It's bringing in so many players coming together in a very short period of time. Obviously, spring happened. There's 15 practices in the spring, but you really get into the meat of it now because you added more pieces ahead of camp, and now it's really time to figure out exactly what you have, work out the depth chart, and then that's going to set the stage for the season opener.
Absolutely. It seems like a lot of time to us fans, but trust me, when you're on that staff and you're the players as well, it goes by so quick. It really does. And you're trying to. And obviously, you've been doing things in the spring and such, and luckily they're able to have players more now than in years past, doing things and being in the meeting rooms and all this and that. So like they're up to speed as much as they can be, but obviously you put on the pads and iron sharpens iron, and it's going to be full force from then on.
Yeah, exactly. And so speaking of some of the battles, I want to focus on offense the rest of this segment. No surprise. I've talked about it a lot on my show. I'm sure you speculated a lot as well on your side. Quarterback position, front and center. I've talked about it basically every day this week. I'm going to keep talking about it because it's literally the most important position on a football team. And UConn's got some players that I feel like they're very deep at the position, at the top end at least. Kalieb Osborne, Tucker McDonald, Jake Merklinger, obviously the transfer from Tennessee. I think there's a lot of talent here. I've been saying, in my perspective, based on what I see, Kalieb Osborne, Jake Merklinger are probably 1A, 1B. And then you've got Tucker McDonald, the holdover from the Jim Morris staff. What are you hoping to see from a quarterback, especially early on in camp? I know you've been around coaching basketball side, maybe other sports as well. Just as you start to see a new team, new players, what do you look for right off the bat in terms of what you're looking for from a leadership perspective, especially from a position that's so important as quarterback? You got to have leadership traits there. You got to be able to lead by example. What do you look for in a starting quarterback?
Well, the first thing that I'm looking at is who's speaking up and saying stuff. My personal opinion, I think the best teams are player led. So I'm looking for which guy, and I'm not saying that you got to be like this big rah guy, but I think it's important that players take ownership in the team and in their position room and such. So I'm kind of looking at what guy is speaking up, and that could be anybody from freshman on down that could take command of that. I don't think that there's. I think a lot of times people think that like, oh, it has to be a senior, it has to be the upperclassman. I don't think that that's the case at all. I just think some guys aren't natural vocal leaders either. So you're kind of looking at like, okay, is this guy could come out of his shell a little bit and kind of be the guy that we're looking for him to be? I think as a coach, that's the first thing I'm looking at. From a player's perspective, I played that position, so I kind of looking at like how far along are you in the process? Like I think it's playing that position is just as much mental as it is physical. I would even say it's more mental, honestly, just because of everything that you have to do and take command of the offense. Because you just naturally have a leadership aspect when you come to that position because of everything that you're doing. The ball's in your hands every play, basically. So you have to be able to break everything down right away. And I mean, I think a huge aspect in this as well is the offensive line perspective. I think that's going to make or break our offense to me personally. We've had such high level guys at that position recently. And I'm not saying we don't now, we just don't know is the thing.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. From a quarterback spot, just for the listeners that are out there, you got Kalieb Osborne, transfer from Toledo. Young player, very high profile recruit coming out of Michigan, set a lot of records in the state of Michigan from a statistical standpoint. He brings a lot of traits that I really like at the quarterback position. He's got a very strong arm, it seems, also has escapability, can move in and out of the pocket, and is electric with the ball in his hands once he takes off. I see a lot of traits that I really like from him. Jake Merklinger from the state of Georgia went to Tennessee, 29 offers. You name the school in the SEC, he had it. So he was very high profile coming out of high school. Finished a very close second to Aguilar at Tennessee a season ago, who ended up being one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. So you think you have a lot of talent there between those two guys. And another thing that I really liked about Kalieb Osborne is just going back to the bowl game against Louisville. It was his first game against a P4 opponent, and he got better and better as the game went along. And in those situations, a lot of young guys with a lot of inexperience, it takes them a while. Just look at how UConn's true freshman quarterback handled the bowl game last season against Army at Fenway Park. It really didn't show that he was getting better and better that game, whereas Kalieb Osborne against Louisville, his first experience against P4 competition, that to me indicates that he understands the game of football a lot. He can see what defenses are doing against him and make adjustments. And maybe that's some of the coaching staff that Toledo brought over here with Jason Candle to UConn as well. I really like that Toledo got better as that game went along and was very competitive late, had a chance to win it. To me, it means it's a team that's well coached. It's a team that doesn't give up. It's a team that's smart. It knows football. It plays for the full 60. And some of those traits are what I like to see, especially with some of these Toledo kids coming in. We talk about culture a lot on this show. And I think that showed through in that game against Louisville. Even though it is a bowl game, I get bowl games aren't what they were before. But to me, that's a good indication that you have a strong culture. And there's a reason why Jason Candle and his staff have not had a losing season in a decade. And that's what I want to see out of a quarterback. So for me, yes. Can you make the throws? Yes. I want to see that. But I also need to see that leadership, the intangibles, just being in and around college coaches, head coaches at this level. And they talk so much about intangibles. I want that, but I also want the guy that on the road, 3rd and 8, loud environment, can make the throw on and put the ball where it needs to be and is not going to fold in those situations. So you can have all those intangibles up until that point, but if you can't come through then are you the guy? So this coaching staff saying all that, they're going to try to put these players in various positions in different circumstances throughout all the camp, whether that's 7-on-7 as much as you can, real live 11-on-11 once you get the pads on, because you're not going to be full pads until probably next week once we get things rolling. And then scrimmage situations a couple Saturdays from now. I hear there's going to be something at Rentschler Field that's going to be open to the media. Hopefully that's a full scrimmage. We'll get to see these guys in action. And that's when you really got a chance to really see these guys in action in a game type environment to see exactly how they're going to handle things. So that's what I'm looking for from a quarterback position. How are they going to handle different situations? You can obviously script things in practice to make situations kind of live, but until you get the bullets flying in the stadium, maybe a scrimmage setting, but not really truly until September 5th. That's when we're really going to know, and this coaching staff's going to know how these players are going to react. So to me, I want to see a quarterback decision made last week, by 1 week before the end of camp. I think you have the first 2 weeks here. You probably get into a scrimmage setting. You probably have penciled in what your depth chart's going to be, and then you refocus the next week. Is that truly how things are playing out? Are guys moving up, moving down, see how they react, have another scrimmage, and then from there, it's probably going to be set. And with 1 week to spare, you go through the final week of camp, and then you have game week and transition, because you need to have game week set where you have your depth chart ready to go ahead of the game. You're not making decisions after the end of camp. So that's how I hope this goes. What say you in terms of when you hope you see a quarterback announced, or at least internally announced? Because I don't know. What my understanding is, Jason Candle plays things very close to the vest. He does build good relationships with media, but at the same time, he does keep things kind of quiet, is what I hear. So I'm not expecting an official announcement. I'd be surprised if we hear an official announcement before the end of camp, to be honest, on quarterback. But what's your position?
I agree with that. I don't think we'll hear anything, honestly, until that point. We might not even hear anything until they put out the official 2 deep the week before the game.
And it even could be
and it could say
or Jake Merklinger or
right.
I've seen that in the past.
Yeah, right. You're exactly right. It very well could say that too. I mean, it's kind of a game, a little bit from a perspective of, okay, Lafayette has no clue what this team's going to look like. Heck, we don't know what this team's going to look like. And that's, there's good and bad to that, obviously. When you look at the quarterback perspective, I mean, I agree with the timeline you laid out. I mean, you want to know internally, obviously, as soon as you can, because then you're going through the process and getting things hammered out the way you want it to. But at the same time, I mean, you want the whole thing to play out as well. So, I mean, you're going to give each guy equal opportunities to do things. And I think all 3 guys have an opportunity. I really do. I think each guy brings something different to the table. Osborne is, like you said, I mean, he brings something that the other 2 don't with his ability, with his athletic ability. His arm is fantastic as well, but he can do things with his legs that the rest of the guys just can't do. And then Jake Merklinger has the pedigree. He's been there and done that as a high school recruit. Like you said, you name it, he had an offer. And he almost won the job at Tennessee last year. And so, I mean, he can do everything that you ask him to do. And Tucker kind of has that the ability that I think fits with what the coaching staff has kind of had in the past when it comes. He reminds me a lot of like Toledo's starting quarterback last year, Tucker Gleason. He kind of has that same type of game in him. So I think all three guys, and I know people don't want to hear us say this, but I think all three guys really have an equal opportunity to get this done.
Yeah, to me, and you know, I might be writing Tucker off a bit. I know a lot of people think very highly of Tucker McDonald, so maybe I should not be doing that because I do think he is certainly in the running. If you look at what UConn puts out on social media, Tucker McDonald has been featured in a number of the photos, some of the videos, especially in recent days ahead of this. So maybe it is truly a three-headed race. Maybe it's 1A, 1B, 1C, not 1A, 1B, and then 2. So it could be a three-headed race. And to me, the more depth you have, the better. Everybody that's been a UConn football fan knows the issues that we've had when it comes to injuries at the quarterback position over the years. Joe Fignano last year was the first quarterback to make it all the way through and not miss time due to an injury in a very, very, very long time. I think there's been 2 or 3 or 4 seasons since UConn went to 1A in 2003 to have a starting quarterback start and finish the year and play every game. So to have depth, it's absolutely paramount. And certainly I don't want to write anybody off heading into this. And I'm very interested to see because we didn't have a lot of time in the spring around this team. We saw 15 minutes of open practice in one of the 15 practices, and then we saw the spring game. But even in the spring game, Jake Merklinger went out. Bold Polston didn't participate. So you really didn't get a chance to really see a lot of these guys. So, all right, we're 17 minutes in. We've only gotten to quarterback. I got to take a quick break here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk running back. We're going to talk receiver. We're going to talk offensive line. And we'll do that as we continue here on Locked On UConn. Today's episode is brought to you by Kalshi. Before season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at season's end? On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. If you're looking at the NFL, you're up here in New England, you're a New England Patriots fan, maybe it's the New York Giants, maybe it's the New York Jets. Will your team qualify for the playoffs this season? Right now, the Jets, the Giants, the Patriots are all trading at certain percentages on Kalshi, meaning a $100 trade could pay out a pretty significant chunk of change if they clinch a playoff spot. If you want to make watching games even more fun, go to Kalshi and you can have more skin in the game. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get up to $500 in bonus credits when you trade $25. Kalshi. Kalshi. Trade on anything. Kalshi is 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Back in on tonight's live episode of Locked On UConn. Just a reminder, Locked On UConn is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you like what you hear, please hit the like and subscribe button, and please keep coming back each and every single day. And as I bring in Bobby Wilson, if you want to just give the listeners a quick shout out of where they can find you, because I know you do a great job covering all the college football, not just UConn as well.
Well, thank you. Yes, that TNT College Foot 1 on Twitter. Then, of course, anywhere you listen to your podcast shows and stuff, you can find it, TNT College Football Podcast. Right now, I'm going through, I break down, this is year 5 or 6 of doing it, where I break down every team at the FBS level. It's quite the undertaking, but it's a labor of love, I'll say.
It's a lot of hard work that you put in. I know, and I know a lot of the listeners that are probably here also listen to you for UConn, but I know you provide a lot of coverage for every school out there. So definitely appreciate you for that. So first segment, we talked a lot about quarterback. Want to stay on offense. You mentioned near the end their offensive line. I think this might just be the deepest position on the team. I don't know who's going to be in the first level of the depth chart and who's going to be the twos. And I think you have at least 10 guys, though, that can, if are asked, can go in and play. I also like there's a lot of experience on this line. Ty Chan, transfer from Notre Dame, has been here at UConn for a few years now. I believe I heard from Jason Candle when he met with the media last week that he's going to be part of the leadership council, which is another thing that you had talked about, player-led teams. Leadership council are certainly player-led teams. It's coaches building trust, building rapport with the leaders of their team to really police the rest of the organization themselves and allow them to focus on that top line. And I think that's what makes Jason Candle's culture so special for those that are in and around it. Because I know there's been other coaches that have come through here with leadership councils. I know Randy Edsall, the second time he came back, he had a leadership council. There were other things that were playing out behind the scenes when Edsall was here. So I don't think it worked as well as he thought it would in terms of I'm a old coach guy now versus I'm an Edsall guy. That's not playing out here, though. The way Jason Candle goes out and recruits, it's very clear that, especially with the success UConn had, there's a lot of respect for what UConn did here with Jim Mora. And now that Jason Candle is coming in, he wants to add to the momentum that UConn built over the last couple of years, the back-to-back 9-win seasons, the 3 bowl games in 4 seasons. So I think that's going to be a big piece for the culture that you're going to build upon what was here. On the offensive line, I'm just going to name some guys off that as I've been going through daily almost doing player profiles. And every time I'm reviewing film of an offensive lineman, I'm liking what I see, but I also like the experience that UConn's brought in. So you got Ty Chan. You have Terrance Moore, who's a fifth-year player coming over from Toledo, originally started his career at Pitt, had a number of offers, 20-plus FBS offers coming out of high school, very high-profile player. I think getting a guy like him to come in, maybe he's an interior guy along with Ty Chan. I think the inside of your offensive line is going to be very, very strong. And then on the outside, you've got guys like Tamaris Walker, a transfer from Maryland, and a number of other players, Dominic Rivera, Isaiah Switzer, Christian Richter is a tight end, but I think he can also probably participate and help out from a blocking standpoint. Oh, no, excuse me. He is an offensive lineman from Marshall. Excuse me. Redshirt junior. So you brought in guys with experience. I know there's another transfer from Rutgers, a transfer from Wake Forest. They brought in a lot of talent. They brought in a lot of their own guys from Toledo. There's depth. Long way of saying there's depth, there's players, there's experience. And what do you think about that? What are some of your thoughts when you think about this offensive line as you assess maybe what UConn has?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's the deepest position group on the team. I'll say that we don't necessarily have like maybe the elite 1 or 2 guys that we've had over the past couple of years. The NFL. I'm not saying none of these guys could get drafted because they could, absolutely. But we don't have like Christian Haynes or a guy like that. Ty Chan is, I would say, our best guy right now. But anything can happen. I think football games are won and lost in the trenches, and we're going to need our guys to gel. It could take a little time, and that's okay. But at the same time, we're like you said, we're very, very deep, and I think that that's important because you're gonna need guys to shuffle in and out when necessary. You're gonna need to be able to trust the guy that's coming in for whoever it may be, because it's hard to ask a guy to play the entire game in certain circumstances. And I think the other thing too is like we don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to do from an offensive perspective, so it's going to be interesting. I think it's very clear that we're going to have a different running style than we've had over the past handful of years. I think that's pretty apparent. But at the same time, we don't know for sure. But we certainly have a type when it comes to offensive linemen. with the recruits that we've gotten, with the guys that we brought in here. One thing that me and Pete Callen, my co-host for the UConn talks that we do, the one thing that we just love seeing from the offensive linemen that we've been getting is we have maulers and guys that love to finish.
Yep.
And these guys will pancake you and will let you know about it. And I love that personally because it's football. It's a physical sport. Like you can tell these guys have fun doing that. And I just personally love that as a fan, as a coach. I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the guys on the list, Fred Johnson, a transfer from Louisville. So it just, again, speaks to the depth. We were just named off 8, 9, 10 guys. Then you also have Fred Johnson from Louisville. So you've got depth and you've got a lot of experience there as well. And I think your offense goes as your offensive line goes, obviously. So we talked about quarterback being the most important position, but almost equally is you need to have a cohesive offensive line that's a unit that knows and has the experience of playing with one another, can make the calls at the line of scrimmage, can give time for your quarterback, and also open up holes in the run game, which offensive coordinator Campanelli was talking last week. He talked about this running back by committee type approach where it's not going to be Cam Edwards getting the ball 25 times a game. It's going to be more, hey, who's got the hot hand? Who's got the better matchup? And I think that speaks to a bit the way Jason Candle likes to approach games. He's not going to ask players to do some things that they're not going to set the team up for success. Last year, maybe, well, UConn did have a ton of success, but you get coaches a lot of times that are very stubborn, I will say. UConn's had some stubborn coaches over the years. Not Jim Moore, but other coaches that have been here where they want to play a certain way. They like their guy at running back. They're going to line them up and they're going to pound the rock no matter who they're playing, whether the team's stacking the box or they're not. What I love about this, and I think this is Jim Moore or Jason Candle learning from his time at Mount Union with Larry Karras. I've talked a little about the PFP, players, formations, plays. They figure out what's going to make their players successful. They're going to set them up with the appropriate matchups from a formation standpoint to accentuate what they're good at. And then they're going to call the plays to get them the ball to take advantage of the advantages that they have. And I say that because the way Campanelli talked about utilizing their running backs, which we'll get to in a sec in terms of who they are, I just like that approach that, hey, maybe one week they're playing a team that's great up front, and you're going to have to be more pass heavy that week because they're so good against the run. But then maybe the next week they've got a great secondary, and you can take advantage of some mismatches with linebackers, with running backs out of the backfield or something like that. In this team, I feel like week to week, it's going to be a different game plan based on the matchup. And you would think most college coaches approach games that way, but there are a number of coaches that play games a certain way, want to control the clock, want to pound the football down people's throats, even if they're hitting a wall time and time again. But I just feel like Jason Candle and the staff are not that way. So it's a breath of fresh air for me. And those of us in and around the UConn program that cover the UConn program, that watch the UConn program, I think this is going to be a fun offense to watch. It's going to be something different every day. It might not be high flying, but they're going to do things to take advantage of the mismatches they have each and every single week. What do you think?
I think that you hit the nail on the head there. I really do. I think there's going to be, like you were saying, they're going to take what the defense gives them or whatever it is that day, whoever they're playing schematically that they can take advantage of. I think Coach Campbell's proven that in the past too at Toledo, doing different things when it comes to some of the teams that they would play against there in the MAC. Some teams are better at stopping the run than others, so he would attack them through the air and vice versa. I think that he's proven that, and like you said, that'll be enjoyable because I think as fans as well, you don't necessarily know week in, week out what are you going to see, and I think that there can be good to that from an excitement standpoint. You look at our running backs. I think they all do different things, which is good because you need that. You need guys who do different things, but they can offer you a plethora of different options when it comes to some guys are really good pass catchers. that you can take advantage of certain things for different perspectives. So I think that that's a big thing. Obviously, we have different types of receivers. We have a lot of big guys. That's certainly something that this staff, they have a type, it seems, but they obviously have other guys that can do other things like Flash, Wilson. I mean, he's obviously different than those guys. He's the quick, get it to him, get out of the way type of guy. So we're going to just utilize different things in different ways, which I think is going to be a lot of fun from our perspective as fans.
Yeah, I agree. I've got one thing to mention and then go into running backs in terms of the players. I really like the way Jason Candle and the staff, with so many new guys coming in, I love we staggered the amount of players that are juniors, that are seniors, that are grads, that are sophomores, that are redshirt sophomores, that are freshmen, because he set up the roster where they're not going to have to go into the portal next year because they have 30 guys graduating. It's not top heavy. It's spread out. It's going to be consistently a certain amount of guys leaving the program. You have all your backfills, and as long as all these players develop into what they expect them to develop into, you're not going to be having this massive Band-Aid utilization in the transfer portal each and every single year. And that speaks to, especially in this day and age of college football and the transfer portal, that speaks to consistency. That speaks to culture. It's going to be trusting the guys that are growing up within this program to stay within this program, get their time when their time has come, develop into the player that they think they're going to be able to be capable of, and then go out and execute on the field, whether that's this year, next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. That I really like that from this roster, where they're not going to have to lean on the portal next season because they have way too many guys graduating. Because I know in the past, that's one thing with Jim Mora, they use the portal so much to patch their roster with grad transfers that, hey, you have them for 1 year. What do you do? Especially, I look at linebacker for his 4 years there. It was a crapshoot every year at the linebacker position. He hit on probably 3 of the 4 years, but then the 1 year that they didn't hit at the linebacker spot, they really suffered. And they should have, in their second year, been a lot stronger than we thought they would have been. And had they hit on those guys, they probably would have beaten NC State that first game that second year because they missed so many tackles. Like, I still remember it to this day being on the field. But it speaks to being able to have a roster that's not top heavy, that's spread out. I think that's going to prove wonders down the line. And I think it speaks to them approaching this portal with the right mindset. They had a plan, clearly. They went out and executed it. They didn't just bring in talent. They brought in the right talent at the right positions who had the right remaining eligibility left. And if you look at running back, it's case in point. You got Kenji Christian, who's an upperclassman. Originally started his career at Virginia Tech, transferred to Toledo. He's named to one of the top players in the nation list, the Shrine Bowl, 1,000 players who could be draft eligible. I mean, I think that speaks to the top-end talent that he could potentially have. Coming out of high school, he had a tremendous amount of offers, landed at Virginia Tech. So that speaks to the talent level right there. Then you got Cyncir Bowers, who transferred from West Virginia. He had some nice touchdown runs a season ago, both catching the ball in the backfield and taking it to the house, as well as on the ground. You have Trey Cornish, who came in, originally started his career at Tulane, went to the MAC, now here. Deshaun Reeder, who had I think it was 75-yard touchdown run against Oregon for Northwestern. He also brought in a Syracuse transfer, and Jaden Hart, who's a younger player. Same with Reeder. So you spread out the talent. Very talented players. You hear where these players started their careers. They're there for a reason. And I think they went to Jason Candle because he was recruiting them originally out of high school. I think it's deep. I think each running back, like you mentioned, does something different. I think Christian Bowers more between the tackles, every down backs, maybe Cornish Reeder more third down backs. Jaden Hart could develop. I don't know exactly. I haven't seen much of him. So I'm really anxious when we get a chance to see this team for the first time on the practice field on Saturday. It's going to be open to the media Saturday, August 8th. This is going to be the first time. So there's a lot to get through, but just on running back, I think you're deep is the point I'm trying to make there.
I agree. I think the one question I have, and I'm not saying that we don't have this person, because I'm sure that we do. I'm sure the staff, and it's probably multiple guys.
Mhm.
The one question I have is, me and Pete kind of looked at third down or red zone efficiency numbers, and Toledo struggled with that the past couple of years. Syracuse did as well with Capinelli, and they had some quarterback concerns, so that's not necessarily his fault. But I'm looking at from the perspective of, okay, say you're 3rd and 3 at the 12-yard line, and even 3rd and 2. Who are we handing off? Who are we handing the ball to in that situation? Who's that guy? And like I said, I'm sure we have. I'm sure the staff has guys in mind that they think can absolutely do it. And Kenji Christian is a fantastic athlete and a fantastic player, and I don't doubt that he can do it. I'm just kind of raising that question for fans to look at, like who could be that guy that when we need 2 or 3 yards is going to go get it.
Yeah. That leads me to intangibles at one of the prior positions we talked about. I think a guy like a Kalieb Osborne can solve some of those problems. And it helps the coaching staff, especially when I haven't looked at those stats. I'm going to go look at those stats now that you mentioned them. But I think for those type of situations, you get maybe a read option with a guy like Kalieb Osborne, 3rd and short. It's tough for a defense. So I'm not saying maybe there's packages. If Jake Merklinger ends up being the guy, maybe he proves himself that he's the starting quarterback, no doubt about it. Or Tucker McDonald, no doubt about it, as the starting quarterback. If you have a guy like Kalieb Osborne sitting there, are there certain packages for him? I mean, those are probably conversations that the coaching staff has had, because it's on film against a P4 team of what Kalieb Osborne can do with his legs. So I don't know. I feel like there's opportunities there that if he doesn't win the starting quarterback job, could there be a role for him on this team in some capacity? Potentially.
Absolutely. And we've seen many teams do that in the past, where they have a guy for that certain type of situation, where you have RPOs and different things off of that.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying I want 2 quarterbacks playing. So that's not what I'm hoping for whatsoever. So let me just, for all the listeners here, let me just get that out of the way. The one position offensively that we haven't talked much about, I don't think we'll spend a lot of time on it. I think the position's set, to be honest. I think Matt Reagan transferred from Boston College. Every time I hear the staff talk about the tight end position, they rave about his leadership ability. He comes from Boston College. He's an upperclassman, 5th-year player. It's going to be his last year in college. He's a New England kid. I think he's probably your starting tight end. How many they utilize, I don't know. I think the prior staff obviously utilized a number of tight ends in different capacities. You had some blocking tight ends on the outside that can get out and do some outside zone for you along with your offensive linemen. I think the tight end position here this season might be a little bit different than what we've seen UConn do in the past. But I think Matt Reagan is your top guy at this stage.
I don't think I've ever heard anything bad said about him, and that's a good thing, obviously. But I agree with you too. I mean, this is going to be a position that's utilized completely differently than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, agreed. And then one thing I had wanted to mention when you were talking about the offensive line a bit, I don't know what type of blocking scheme they're running. I don't know if it's zone. I don't know if they're going to run a lot of outside zone like we've seen in the past that gets your running backs outside the hashes and allows them to pick their running lanes and utilize athleticism for your blockers that can get downfield and, as you mentioned, be very physical down the field and put guys down and open up lanes. So that's something, as we get to Saturday, I'm going to be keeping an eye on as well, is not just what the rotation is, but what the entire offense and operation looks like from snap to finish. How aggressive are these guys? How physical are they? How are they blocking? All those sorts of things. So there's a lot to get to, especially missing the spring. Spring, for me, it's a lot more laid back usually. It allows It allows us to get to know the coaches, the staff, the players a lot more because we can focus in. We don't have a game we're prepping for to cover or anything like that. It's a time to, hey, I'm interested to see this player develop over 5 weeks with 3 practices a week. How do they look? How do they develop? And usually at this point in the year, I know what UConn has. I think a lot of that was it was so new to the staff that they didn't open it. I know UConn was also going through an epic run through the NCAA tournament, and there wasn't a lot of media around at the time, so maybe they didn't think a lot of people would show up. Maybe that's also the case, but we enter this camp with a lot of unknowns, which is a different place than we usually are at this stage, at least for me. So we'll see. Can you still stick around, Bobby?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I need to take another quick break. On the other side, we're going to switch over to the defense. I see this. We're getting more and more listeners as we go. So appreciate you guys hopping in. We'll be right back as we continue here on Locked On UConn. Today's episode is not brought to you by the game. It's brought to you by Game Time. Here it is. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, and festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple, with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. The biggest pet peeve usually is when you think you found a great deal, get all the way to checkout, and suddenly the final price looks completely different. Game Time takes the guesswork out. There's something different about being there live, whether it's a crowd reaction, the energy in the building, or a moment that everyone experiences together. It's one of those things that doesn't fully translate through a screen. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Back in on this, what day is it? Tuesday night edition of Locked On UConn, as we are half a day away from the start of UConn football training camp, fall camp, as the season is. Actually, tomorrow is 1 month from the season opener. Can you believe it? As we continue here on Locked On UConn, we are switching over to the defensive side of the ball. And just like I finished, I can't wait to see this defense on the practice field, see how it looks. I love the depth. I really do. And I think, again, it speaks to the plan that Jason Candle and the staff had on the recruiting trail. But first and foremost, I want to talk about Ryan Manilak. I think you're going to be seeing a 4-3 scheme. I think you're going to be seeing a scheme that utilizes a traditional front seven, where you have a traditional linebacker core that are true linebackers. I think you're going to have defensive ends that can rush and get after the quarterback. I love this approach. I love this unit. I think I'm going to like what I see. I hope I walk away after Saturday saying I love what I see. What are your thoughts just on Ryan Manilak first and foremost?
Well, first off, UConn fans can rejoice that we are almost certainly going to be running a 4-3. So there's that. We can be excited about that. And I don't mean that as a slight against Matt Brock and the staff that we had last year. I think they did what they could.
Can I make one comment about that?
Go ahead.
I know there was times the UConn defense didn't look great. There were categories where the UConn defense was ranked near the top of the country in certain areas. Takeaways.
Yeah.
Sacks. Brian Parham, the most under the radar, least talked about MVP of a team from last season, played on the defensive side, had a tremendous impact at the linebacker position. So were there areas that UConn struggled defensively last year? Absolutely. But at the same time, you don't just create turnovers. Teams aren't just going to sit back and say, here, UConn, here's the ball. Here's this crazy turnover mark. Because I've seen in some previews this year from national publications that There's no way UConn can recreate the fluke that happened last season with the turnover margin. I mean, like I just said, the opponents didn't just turn and hand the ball to UConn and say, "Here, UConn, here's a fumble. Let's improve your numbers." UConn caused those turnovers with the approach that Mack Brock had, the approach that Jim Mora had, and the players and the pressure that they put on opposing defenses last season. Now, do we like the amount of points they gave up at times? Absolutely not. Do we like going and losing in double overtime on the road? No, of course not. So there's a lot of frustration there with the defense, but there were also aspects of the defense that were pretty dang good, which I will take, more than happy to take, last year's performance from a turnover standpoint on this year's team. Back to you.
Well, I agree, but I think that the number one thing just to say about Coach Manilak is that so many Pitt fans wanted him to be the next DC at Pitt, and I think that that's all you really have to say. Look at the elite defenses that Pitt has produced over the past 10 plus years and the talent that they've produced from an NFL perspective on the defensive side of the football. I think that that's all you really need to say. This is going to be a defense that attacks and plays with their hair on fire, and it's going to be a lot of fun for us fans to watch.
And there's so many. Let's start at linebacker because there's a tremendous amount of transfers. K'Von Sherman, another player named to the watch list, the 1,000 Shriners Children's 1,000 top NFL potential draft picks. First team All-MAC last season at the linebacker spot. I think UConn and Jason Candle and the staff, having coached him last year, are expecting similar output this season. I think he's part of the leadership council. I think he's the heart and soul of your defense right off the bat. I think he's going to be a leader for you. But next to him, you also brought in guys like a Terrance Dudley from NC State, Luke Murphy from Coastal Carolina. You've got another transfer from Penn who my biggest takeaway from the spring game, huge fan of him, John Lista. So listen, I think you have guys that are experienced, that have performed well. Your transfer, Luke Murphy, is it Luke Murphy? Luke Murphy, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Carolina. He's transferred a few times. His stop before Coastal. I don't think his year last year went as good as he would have wanted, but his year prior, he put up great stats. So I think you have guys that are more than capable to step in and be productive at the linebacker spot. I think you also have a unit that, just based on some limited time seeing them, can play sideline to sideline, are going to be able to create havoc, are going to be able to pressure the quarterback, are going to be able to fill run lanes. What are your thoughts on some of these guys at the linebacker spot, first and foremost?
Sherman is the best player on the team, I'll say. He's dang
I agree. Good. I agree. I had to put in for the national Locked On show top players from your teams. He's front and center, the top player. So 100% agreement. He's probably our top prospect as of right now. Obviously things can change, but that young man is a heck of a football player, and he's proven that. John Lista is going to be a fan favorite from the get-go. Folks, just YouTube him and look at some of the plays that he's made. He plays football the old school mentality, and it is beautiful to watch. And I love what you said about Luke Murphy too. This young man has been productive in different stops, and he's a really solid player too. And there's other guys too, but those three in particular come to mind. Yeah, those are the ones that stand out to me. And I know there's other guys at the roster, and we'll get to know some of these guys as we go here. Another interesting one, if you remember, Kylish Hicks started out as a receiver with Jim Mora. And I kept waiting. I remember a couple of years ago, he kept saying, hey, we got to get Kylish Hicks the ball. We got to get Kylish. It never came. He ended up going to the secondary last season. He's got LB next to him now. I got to see what he looks like these days. He must have been in the weight room a bit. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of other transfers. I know Ricky Williams is another one that came over from Toledo, maybe an underclassman. there's a lot of other players too to get to at the second level, but another deep position, defensive line. Number of transfers from a number of prominent schools. You got Duke, you've got Texas with Melvin Hills. You've got a number of players that I think can be very productive. Riser Presley, transfer from Buffalo, longer athletic guy, 6'6", 271 edge rusher. I mean, you talked about size. I think size is definitely something that UConn focused on, but I think also speed and athleticism. You think back to guys, I don't know if you were around then, but I know some of the listeners here, Cody Brown, Lindsey Witten. You're getting these longer athletic guys that can get one-on-one around offensive, bigger tackles and make plays in the backfield on third and long. Like, let them go to work. You don't need the linebackers coming on blitzes because you can win the one-on-one matchups at the line of scrimmage. That's what I like about this 4-3 scheme is you get those type of guys to be able to rush off the edge. And it's not just those guys. There's a number of other players as well. Makija Latiker, Chamberlain Campbell, some younger guys. Matt Hoffman, though, another guy, a holdover from Jim Mora. He got better and better as the season went on last season. And when guys got healthy that were starters at the start of the year last year, I was noticing they were playing behind Matt Hoffman because of the development that he had last season. So that's another guy. I think there's a lot of guys that stuck around that didn't leave, that were loyal to UConn as a whole and liked what they saw from Jason Candle. Matt Hoffman's certainly one of them that I think could potentially be one of the leaders on this defensive line.
I love his motor. He just doesn't stop. He plays defensive end the way that you want guys to play. Another guy that I really love on this D line is Sean Carter. I think that he's got pro potential on the interior. He's a big fella, a space eater of sorts. And I don't want to maybe categorizing him as that is maybe thought of maybe a little derogatory in some ways. But the young man, he takes up a lot of space, and it's going to be teams aren't going to run towards him. Let's just say that. So he's going to like funnel backs to certain places where the linebackers can then go make the play, hopefully. But like you said, there's so many guys here, and they're different body types and different, like you said, I mean, huge, long defensive ends that we haven't necessarily had in the past, at least the past couple years. Mm-hmm. There's just so many different things that these guys are going to be able to do, and I think that that's going to be taken full advantage of by this staff.
Yeah, agreed. Another guy, Luckman from Ohio transfer. I mean, he had pretty good production there in the MAC. So we're skipping over a lot of guys. A lot of guys have a lot of experience elsewhere. And if you're coming into this system, Avery Dunn transferred from Toledo. Another guy that met with the media last week, which indicates to me coaches think very highly of him if they're putting him in front of media on media day. First time opportunity, the media has a chance to talk to the team. He's one of the guys. I think they're probably expecting some big things from him. So, yeah, listen, I think, again, another position very deep, and again, another position where they spread out the eligibility remaining. So I think if you don't get on the field this year, don't worry. I think there's going to be opportunities for you down the line if you develop and continue to stay true to the staff. All right, back into the defense. To me, the most productive, talented, most developed position groups between corners and safeties that Jason Candle has had during this time at Toledo. It seems like they're the ones that get to the NFL. And I was just thinking to myself, and I talked about this on the show yesterday, if he was doing that at Toledo, what's he going to do here with all these resources to be able to bring in maybe guys even more high level? Nothing against anybody that's already gone to the NFL, because if you're in the NFL, you're pretty dang good. But I just look at his track record with defensive backs, whether it be safeties or corners. I expect big things. And I know there's been some things out there that, hey, the front seven is going to dictate how this team goes defensively, but I think I'm optimistic just based on Jason Candle's track record of what they're going to have in the secondary. Not having seen these guys, I can't tell you the difference between any of the corners right now. I can't tell you any of the difference between any of the safeties, except to me, Braden Moore, big, long, physical. That's the only one I can come to you with. another guy that's met with the media already. So I think they think very highly of him. Maybe he's one of your guys that's out there. But they brought in a lot of talent. They brought in Musa Kane, a transfer from Duke. You have a USC safety transfer and Steve Miller. You've got a number of players on the back end of this defense coming in, both from Toledo and elsewhere, that I think have a chance to grow into pretty dang good players. You have some Georgia kids on this roster, and I love Georgia cornerbacks. UConn's had a lot come through here and that have developed into some pretty good players and have gone on to the NFL in their own right. So, listen, I'm very optimistic at that spot defensively. Just your thoughts on what you've seen from Jason Candle, maybe even just from a secondary perspective from his time in Toledo.
Well, I think what you laid out is the perfect way for us fans to look at it, is look at his track record and what he's done with the players that he's put in the NFL. He's put so many guys in there from the defensive back room that I just trust what he feels is right to do with these guys. He knows better than I do, that's for sure. So I'm not going to ever question what he's doing back there, what they're doing back there, because look at McNeil Warren, the guy that he had back there last year. That kid was a superstar at the safety position. Was a second-round pick to the Cleveland Browns. He's going to do tremendously well. And it's like you said, look, and this is no slight against Toledo at all, because that's a good program. But UConn offers a lot more than what they can offer. And so and we've seen that already with the recruits that we have committed for 2027. I think that these guys who play defensive back look at Coach Candle and what he's done, the pedigree that he has of putting guys at the next level, and they say, okay, I can be that guy too. So, like you said, I don't necessarily know each and every person on this list and what they bring to the table, but I trust Coach Candle and the staff to manage them correctly and to get them in the right spots that they need to be.
Yeah, completely agree. We talked about Braden Moore already. I'll just run through some of these. You've got Rennick Dorlis, transfer from Rutgers, redshirt freshman. CJ Bell, redshirt freshman, transfer from Iowa. You've got Fresno transfer Jaden Davis, redshirt senior, defensive back. You also have a transfer from Michigan State, Revels, who I think you're at Michigan State, probably pretty good. We talked about the Duke transfer already. I think one player I want to talk about that's a holdover from the Jim Mora era is Saxon Sukanik, who he was getting on the field back half of the season last year over some guys that I thought should have been playing more earlier on in the season. You had a Penn State transfer on the roster. You had some others that I thought were going to be very productive, and he was beating them out at the safety spot. I think he has the potential to grow into something pretty special as well on the back end of this defense. So again, yes, a lot of newcomers, but you also have another guy there that I think you could grow into and be able to trust on the back end of your defense.
He comes from a really good family. I've had conversations with some family member or two of his. He was raised right, and that young man's work ethic is going to get him on the field just because of everything I've ever heard about him and how hard he works. Obviously, he's super talented too, but he's willing to put in all the extra effort that he needs to be successful. And I think that's why he was able to get on the field early last year, just because he worked his tail off and the coaches wanted to reward him for that.
Yeah, agreed. I do expect to see him competing for time. I think we skipped over the wide receiver position. Two players I just want to call out. There's so much talent here. Maybe three players I want to call out. Spring game, I think it was Amirian Lang catching everything. I think he's a guy that could potentially be electric. Shamar Porter's back. Former top recruit for Kentucky at the SEC in one of their recruiting classes. We've seen what he's done here. I think he has a chance to become a leader for this team at that position. Certainly learned from Skylar Bell and a few others from the last couple of seasons. And then there's one other I want to talk about, Ryder Treadway. He stood out to me in the bowl game, transfer from Toledo. I feel like he was a younger guy last year, but it seems Jason Candle and this offensive staff talk very, very highly of him. He's another guy that was put in front of the media on media day. I didn't have a chance to be there that day. I had a conflict. But another player that I think this team trusts. I think they can be an early leader for this team. Another guy that seems to run crisp routes, very strong hands over the middle type guy. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of him this season for UConn. So I think we touched on it. But go ahead. Yeah, talk about the receivers.
Well, my listeners know what I feel about Shamar Porter. This young man just needs his opportunity. If you get him the ball, he is special. And I just hope that he has that opportunity. I think it's going to be allowed for him to have that. He just has to take advantage of it. And then, like you said, I think we just have a number of guys here that are just sure-handed guys. We got big body guys. We got fast guys. We got just a great mixture of guys that I just can't wait to see it unfold. And I think that we have the perfect example last year, Skylar Bell. If you come to UConn and play wide receiver, I know it's a different coaching staff, but if you come here, play wide receiver, you can do special things.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to overlook the performance that Joe Fagnano and Skylar Bell had last season. What that did to get probably an uptick into what maybe Jason Candle could have originally gotten from the quarterback position, from the wide receiver position. I mean, you're pulling in guys from Oklahoma State, Cam Abshire, 6'4" wide receiver, redshirt junior, Emmanuel Ross from Syracuse, 6'1", but 6'2". So in addition to the guys we already talked about, and then Jediah Willoughby, I know he had some injury issues last season. I talked to him in the spring. He's one of the guys I talked to in the spring. Seems fully healthy, ready to go now. So interested to see what he can do once he gets a full camp in front of him. And then I don't know if Kai Flash will be back in time. He's a speedster coming out of Youngstown State. I think he got banged up, pretty serious knee injury in the spring. I don't know if he's going to be ready to go for the season or not. I'd probably say maybe another year for him. But again, I'm just speculating. I got to see practice to see who's out on the field and whatnot before I should probably say what's going to be transpiring from an injury perspective. So listen, we covered every position except kickers. But let me just say real quick, Ole Miss transfer Mike Baker, I expect to be the kicker. There we go.
Nothing else needs to be said.
All right, rest of is there anything else we didn't touch on in this show that you want to talk about before we go to some of the comments?
I just want to say that the punter, Tommy Warner, is from Division II Northwest Missouri State. I'm a Division II guy from Grand Valley State, so I hope he does well just because of my connection to Division II.
You stumped me. I didn't even know who the punter was going to be. There we go. That's the one position I did not know on this roster. And then they also have a transfer from Memphis, though, too, Spencer Sullins.
Yes,
yeah. He's a redshirt freshman. I'm going to take a gander that the other guy is an upperclassman. Let's say here. No, true freshman. Wow. I expect this to have some separation there. But listen, deep team is what my takeaway is. I think the staff had a plan. They had an approach. We talked about it already on this show, but they executed. They brought in the talent they wanted. They staggered the eligibility remaining that they're not going to be in a position. No way, no how. And Jason Candle, I think his first day at the mic, introductory press conference, this is the only time I'm going to have to lean on the portal, is what he said. And he's continuously said that. And he built this team the way that he thinks it's going to be successful in year one. So, listen, I think I'm going to trust in him because his track record says you got to trust in him. And then the Mount Union connection and the program that they went through, I think, speaks to the development, not just as a player, but as a coach, along with Matt Campbell, who went from Iowa State, now at Penn State, Nick Sirianni, who's now head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. All those guys came up together. They developed their coaching styles the same way. They've all been successful. I mean, you look at what Matt Campbell did at Iowa State to turn that program into what they were the last decade as well. They coached together. He was the former head coach at Toledo before he went to Iowa State, and that's why Jason Candle ended up being the head coach at Toledo. He stuck back to run his own program, and they worked their way up together. And listen, I just think the production, the success, and to do it for so long in the MAC, especially at a time when college football and college sports and the landscape changed. It wasn't just go recruit high schoolers, develop them, and then here's your team for the next 4 years. No, it's you got to compete with with the money coming from the P4 that, hey, we know this is a top player that's going to be going on to the NFL. We're going to throw a bag of money at them, and we're going to go get them. But at Toledo and with Jason Candle, he was able to keep his guys because of the culture that he had, the team that they built, the loyalty that they had, wanting to see it all the way through. I think that just speaks volumes to me in this day and age that this is the type of guys, these are the type of players that are going to be playing for you and your university if you're a UConn football fan. And I think UConn is in for more success going forward. All right, I got to take one final quick break. On the other side, we're going to be going to the viewer comments. Bobby, you good to stay around? We'll keep this.
Absolutely.
I'll stick around as long as fans want to keep talking, but we'll be right back. And it's literally that short. That's all we're doing. We just got to put an ad spot. All right, let's go to comment section. We're going to scroll in. Oh, we don't have that many comments. We've got viewers. Hey, if anybody's listening, you want to talk UConn football, you want to talk anything UConn related, you want to speculate about conference realignment, you want to talk about Nikisha Sales coming back to the UConn women's staff, you want to talk about the UConn men's basketball program, the Dan Hurley reaction of the new 5-year rule on July 31st, 2 months ahead of a season to be able to add players to your team, and his choice words about that. Any offers that are out there, I'll talk anything. So now's your time. Ask me a question. Send it over.
I saw that Syracuse basketball just got a commitment from a kid from Quinnipiac who was like their leading scorer last year, who's taking advantage of that rule. So it's chaos. It's
chaos. Let's focus on the football questions first, and then we'll get into some other stuff.
Yeah.
We should talk realignment too, as we go. But it is 11:08, so I want to be mindful of time too. But let's kick off here. So first comment comes in from, I don't know the name. I'm not even going to, the EVP, the Executive Vice President. There you go. All right. If you can get us any practices that are open to the public, let me know. All right. So the schedule that I'm aware of is this Saturday. I assume we're going to be able to see the entire practice. It's going to be open in stores. Hopefully the rain holds off. I think there's a chance of thunderstorms. Hopefully we're outside. We'll be able to check out the new practice fields too, because UConn over the summer ripped out the grass fields, put in brand new turf fields outdoors. They've got 2 beautiful fields, it looks like. I do miss the grass, though, I will say. Everybody going to turf, I'm not a huge fan, especially when you play at the Rent on grass. I don't know if I like that or not, but let's go see what it looks like. I know from a maintenance perspective and from a weather perspective, it's going to allow them to be outdoors more often, but that's just my take. So August 8th is the first media practice. August 15th, I do know there's something at the Rent, probably a scrimmage, will be open to the media too. Or maybe it's just a glorified practice open in the media at the Rent. We'll see. But that's what it sounds like will be the first 2, at least confirmed dates for the media to be able to check out the team. I don't know anything about open to the public. I don't know if Jason Candle is going to do that. My guess is going to be probably not, especially when you have a pretty tough schedule early on. After Lafayette, you've got Maryland. Right after that, you're going to probably want to keep as close to the vest as you possibly can, what you have. They'll obviously be putting stuff on film against Lafayette, but then you got week 2, Maryland. I think you're working towards that. Make a statement. Those are my thoughts. Anything from you?
Maryland is the toughest game on the schedule. Of all the teams that I broke down almost every team that we're going to play so far.
Mm-hmm.
Maryland, don't let their record last year fool you. Their quarterback he's the real deal. He's a good football player. He's young, but man, he can play. And they got other guys too. But and Loxley's probably coaching for his job, so he needs to have a great year this year. So they should be ready to go. And then I agree with you from the perspective of the field. If you play on grass, why wouldn't you practice on grass? That's just my personal opinion. And then the fact of like being an athlete, you want to be on grass, you don't want to be on turf. That's just my honest opinion. Maybe it's just me being a little bit older, and I never really played on turf fields. It was always grass. I mean, in Michigan, by Halloween there's snow on the ground and we're playing. So I mean, you deal with it.
Yeah. Agreed. I had a thought. What was one thing you said? Maryland. I did also a breakdown of, hey, rank the games, rank the toughest. What's the most important game of the year? What are you most looking forward to? For me, it's Maryland, and then it's the game after that, and then the game after that, game after that, game after that. To me, the last time UConn played Maryland was 50-7. It was the first game of the 2024 season. It's the last time UConn has lost a game by more than one score. UConn hasn't lost a regulation game or a game in regulation. They have the longest streak in the nation to not lose a game in regulation outside of bowl games. We won't look at the Army game because UConn wasn't full strength and all that. We'll take that out of there. They have the longest streak in the nation. And I think that just, again, it and I know the schedule of the last two seasons, it wasn't spectacular. It wasn't the best competition out there. There were games, and you should be competitive and you should win. But listen, if you look back and think back 5 years ago, and we're talking UConn football, and we look back and say the first game of the 2024 season was the last time UConn lost by more than one score, we wouldn't be thinking you're talking about the UConn football program of what it was. So Jim Moore did a spectacular job. Jason Candle's coming in and is picking up and looking to build off that momentum. And this Maryland game is so critically important for those of us that are in and live in the state of Connecticut and know how the fan base is. There's a lot of attention on this team. There are UConn basketball fans that I have a pretty large group of basketball fans that have always been UConn football. Why do we want to focus on UConn football? Why do we want to talk about UConn football? This year, they have tickets already to Maryland, to North Carolina, to Syracuse. They have tickets to those games. This is the opportunity for the UConn football program to once again pull in the fringe fan base that are historically just UConn basketball fans. There was a time not too long ago, 20 years ago, UConn was selling out 40,000. UConn administration was talking about, hey, if we got in the ACC, we're expanding the stadium to 60,000 because we can easily do it in off season because all the framework's in place. 5 years ago, you would have laughed at that comment. But this is the opportunity for this school, for this football program, to bring back the fan base to what it was, to have sellouts. Because I'll tell you, if UConn has a strong showing against Lafayette and they compete against Maryland, which will be I'm guessing will be a sold-out game, just like Duke was last season, or close to it. Those fans that were in the stadium for Maryland are coming back for Syracuse. They're coming back for North Carolina. They're probably coming back for James Madison, too, because they're going to have a great experience and they're going to be competitive. It's going to be a fun environment. And that does wonders for one of the topics I talked about when it comes to realignment as well. It's such a big game in my mind because UConn fans are so fickle. This fan base is so fickle. It's a professional sports fan base, which I've talked about a lot. And if you think about what that means, you're talking about New York fans and Boston fans. And the second a team struggles, fans are out. And you got to prove it to them over and over and over again before they're coming back. This Maryland game is so big. I've had this circled on the calendar. I think it's the biggest game of the year. It very well could be the toughest game of the year. I think it's the biggest game UConn football has had in a very, 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 very long time. I know the Duke win last year, it was great. It was spectacular. I know the win over Fresno State to get them their first bowl game in a long time in Jim Moore's first year was big. There was a win over Houston that got them to a bowl game in 2015. But this Maryland game, to me, is the biggest game this program has had probably since they've been in the Big East, I would say. Or the Michigan game, I would say. The Michigan home game. Biggest game at Rensselaer Field. Circle the calendar, and the importance around that game of how UConn shows themselves, which is why what starts tomorrow is so critically important to get things right early on, to figure out the depth chart as early as possible, get as much experience on the field, on the practice field, playing off one another on the defensive side, figuring out what you have offensively to really get a rhythm of how this team is going to operate once you get into the regular season. I think it's so very important for UConn to come out with a strong showing. All right. Josh Lafferty, have you seen Merklinger in person? Would he have come to Stores without a strong indication that he'll be the starter? We saw him in the spring game for a very limited time. My quick takeaway, and it was, I tend to, when I see players have a pretty quick first impression. I had it with Joe Fignano when he first came. I see similar things with Jake Merklinger in terms of ball doesn't hit the ground. He's going to the right spot with the football. Those are the things I'm looking for. That he's on the same page with his receivers, even in a practice setting, even on 7-7. Because in years past, UConn's had quarterbacks where even it's routes on air and the ball is bouncing. Receivers and quarterbacks were not on the same page. And you show up at practice and you're like, oh, geez, this is going to be a long season offensively if that's happening. But it flipped when Joe Fignano showed up on campus. Immediately. It took me one practice to realize this is the quarterback of the future for the UConn football program. And I was disappointed that Jim Mora went with some other players once NIL players got here because they had the money versus the potential talent. And I know Fignano got banged up his first year here, sat on the bench behind Nick Evers, and then finally got a chance to get on the field. But I had a similar impression of Jake Merklinger, even though it was a very short stint. So, yes, I have seen him in person. Again, it wasn't extended time. It was red zone drills, and it was one time down the field. So, it wasn't a full practice even. But what I did see, he clearly knows the game of football. He knows where he wants to go where he should go with the football. He goes through his progressions. And again, limited time, he puts the ball in the right spot. So to me, everything I've heard about him, the accolades coming out of Georgia, what I heard about him in the battle at Tennessee and that quarterback competition, again, very small sample size for me, but what I saw is what I've heard. And that spells very good things for UConn, I will say. Anything you want to add to that, Bobby?
From the people that I've talked to nationally as well, like from the recruiting perspective, from him as a high school player, it was those exact same things that you just laid out. I mean, you get a guy that has the pedigree that he has. I mean, I think the biggest thing here is obviously what Joe was able to do here helped us land a player like Jake Merklinger. If Joe doesn't do what he does, we don't get a guy like Jake Merklinger here. I think that's very, very apparent. So with that said, I mean, yes, he's coming from Tennessee, so you think, okay, this guy, he can play some football. I have not seen him in person like you have, but I've talked to many people on the national side where they're saying the same things that you're saying.
Yeah. I'm anxious. I'm excited. I'm optimistic. I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to see this team in person. So, all right, let's keep going with the comments. We've got PCal. Jason Candle is not known to be a multiple tight end set utilizer on his teams in the past. A big trend developing in a lot of high-level college and pro offensive utilization of multiple tight end sets. Yeah. And I think, as we mentioned, Matt Reagan is probably your top tight end entering. I don't remember seeing a lot of multiple tight end sets in the spring game either. For formations, not sets, formations. So I got to agree with you here. Bobby, I'll lean on you because he was playing in your part of the country out there. Just your thoughts on that comment.
Well, he's one of the few coaches that's in this part of the country that doesn't utilize that. So he's kind of outside the norm in that regard because, I mean, you look at the teams here in Illinois where I live, like every team is very, very multiple tight end set from the college ranks down. I mean, even in Michigan where I grew up and played, it's the same thing. I mean, Coach Candle, what he's done is he just hasn't really utilized. I'm not saying he doesn't utilize. I shouldn't say utilize. The way utilizes the position differently than others. So I think what's said here is spot on, really.
Yeah. And it's a big change from what we had with Jim Mora, who was
Mm-hmm.
at times would have 2-3 tight ends on the
Mm-hmm.
field at a time. You had maybe glorified wide receivers playing tight end at times with Justin Jolie, where you had off detached from the line, more in the slot outside. That speaks to his skill set. Juice Vereen, another type of guy that was able to do that last season as well. Then you had your more prototypical blockers, and then guys that can help over the middle. So Jim Mora is very tight end heavy, as have been some of the coaches in the past. Yeah, I completely agree. And to me, I want to see guys that are more skill guys on the outside getting the ball, making plays down the field. And I think we talked about it earlier in the show in terms of size. I like the size of your 6'4" and above wide receivers. You have multiple of those guys. You don't have one or two of those guys on the roster. You have several, handful. And to me, I remember being on the road, NC State, a couple years back. I think it was Jim Moore's first year, maybe. The size difference at the wide receiver position was just so drastic, being on field level. You had every receiver for NC State 6'5", 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". And then you go on the other side of the field, UConn's rolling out Keelan Marion, who's 6 foot. He's your best receiver. Cam Ross, 6 foot. So the size differential. I mean, UConn focused on that once they were able to start utilizing NIL money. You got Shamar Porter in here, and you got some bigger guys. I love that Jason Candle's doing the same thing, because I think you need size at that receiver spot, where you don't have the skill and the speed and the athleticism to get open. Maybe you can utilize your size to get position battles for balls as well in the passing game. I think that's something that UConn lacked several years back when they didn't have that type of size at the receiver position. So I think that's going to help the passing game overall as well. All right, let's keep moving. Pikel again. Is the apparent lack of depth at tight spot, or at least a concern? I don't think so. And I don't think it's a lack of depth. I think it's just, to your point and to what Bobby was just saying, we're not going to see multiple tight ends on the field at times. Maybe there are certain situations. Maybe it's 3rd and 1. You want a couple tight ends there. I don't think it's a lack of depth. I don't think it's a lack of skill. I don't think it's a lack of talent. I think it's just, hey, if you look at the numbers on the roster, you don't have a significant amount of tight ends as opposed to what you had in years past. You got 5, probably 6 tight ends, 5 tight ends. Yeah, 5 tight ends on the roster. So you're not overly heavy on the tight end spot. I don't think it's a lack of depth, though. I think it's just approach. If anybody has more, I see there's more people here, but if anybody has more comments, keep them coming. Arrow, go Lions, go Huskies. Detroit, Michigan guy. There you go. I know you're Bobby. I know you're a big Lions fan.
This guy's my best friend.
I'm so ready for ball to be back. Do you guys think the PCSA will be voted on? Let's touch on the conference realignment real quick. I think this is a critical week for the Protect College Sports Act. Just a quick 30-second summary. What matters for realignment? If the bill passes as currently constructed, there would be, if it passes as currently constructed, just to reiterate, if there's no more legal language or change, there would be a cap at 19 teams per power conference. And if once it's passed, a team that's currently in a power conference would have to be an independent for 5 seasons. If they leave, say, the ACC, if you're Florida State, you would have to be an independent playing member for 5 seasons before you could go and join the SEC. So I think the fact that the SEC and the Big Ten late Friday finally agreed and voted to support the bill. My take is they only did that because they thought this week it's going to get approved by the Senate. And I think a lot of these conference commissioners have a lot of different plans, which have been talked about across a number of different media outlets out there, national media outlets. There's been rumors about this Super League. Does the SEC break away? Does the Big Ten join them? Do they form their own thing? Is there an extra subdivision, et cetera, et cetera? I think the fact that you got the Big Ten and the SEC aligned to what is in the PCSA, put that to bed for a very short term. But if this doesn't move forward and get passed by the Senate this week, that could change what these leaders think about. Because after this week, a lot of politicians aren't going to be focused on college sports. A lot of politicians are going to be focused on, I want to keep my job in a couple of months. And they're going to be out campaigning and all this. So I think it's critical the PCSA gets passed this week. Otherwise, it might be a long time before we see this opportunity again. So that's my thoughts on the PCSA. Touching on realignment real quick, though. I think if this passes, I did a show late Friday. And Bobby, I'm interested in your take on this. If it passes as currently written, I think it's tremendous news for UConn. I think it opens up opportunities. I think the ACC and Big 12 are ultimately battling over who's going to get UConn because they're going to need more money to be competitive because Florida State and Clemson, they're not going to be able to pick up and jump immediately to the SEC or the Big 10. And they're going to want as much money as possible. And even if they don't like what UConn is from a football playing standpoint, the fact is UConn basketball, the market they're in, will bring in additional marketing deals, will bring in additional money. And in the end, that's all Florida State and Clemson want to be competitive. They want to be as close to the SEC and the Big 10 as possible. So that's my thoughts of where this would go if the PCSA ultimately gets approved by the Senate. But even if it gets approved by the Senate, it's not done. It's got to get approved by the House, and then it's got to get signed by the leader of the country. So a lot of things need to play out before this actually becomes law. So it's not quite there yet, but we'll see. TBD. From a realignment perspective, though, I think this opens up opportunities for the Big 12 or the ACC. Bobby, what would your preference be if UConn had their pick?
Well, how big am I dreaming? Is the question.
I'm limiting it to the ACC and I'm limiting it to the Big 12.
Yes,
I'm not saying UConn can go to the Big 10.
I understand.
I think everybody would want to be in the Big 10.
I selfishly want that as well because of where I live, but that's beside the point. But personally, I say forget the Big 12. They've had so many opportunities. They've had so many chances, and they've left us behind. And folks can say the ACC has done that too, to a point. But I understand from the basketball perspective what the Big 12 brings to the table. The level of competition that you're going to be playing is unbelievable. In football, it's very, very competitive. Texas Tech has a ton of money, but they're still kind of, they're not newer to the table, but they're kind of the quote unquote up and coming type program in the college football world. There's not necessarily a team in the Big 12 that says like we are the flag bearer of this conference from a football perspective. So I think if we enter the Big 12, I know if we enter the Big 12 from a football perspective, we are going to compete from day one. And we have had more draft picks than almost every Big 12 institution over the past 20 to 25 years. Even when the national media wants to tell you how awful our football program was, we've still had more draft picks in the NFL than almost every Big 12 institution. You look at the ACC, we have a lot of similarities with a lot of those programs. There's certainly old rivalries that we could be a part of, and I think that's great. And I'm a fan of that. I think that would be great for our fan base. I will say that there are some programs in the ACC, though, that you can look at from a football perspective that these are the flag bearers for football. Miami is going to be a national title contender every single year. Can we get to their level? That's the question. And I personally think, I've said this before, I think UConn from a football perspective is a sleeping giant. I really do. And I know I've had some national people laugh at me when I say that. But I think the proof is in the pudding. When you look at UConn, when we were on the same level playing field competing at in a power conference. Look at what UConn football did. I know this is a UConn podcast, so a lot of these people know that. But when I'm in the national circles that I'm a part of, these people don't even realize the things that we did in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, in that range. People don't understand that. They just think, oh, UConn football is the worst program in the world because in the 2010s and such, in the past, from 2010 to 2020 and even a little bit further on, they were just completely awful. Okay. Even with that said, look at what we did when we were on a level playing field with everybody else. I think if you give UConn that opportunity, it's been proven they'll do it again. So to answer your question, I would say the ACC, personally. That's just my personal take.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the matchups that would be had in those two conferences as well. I mean, in that conference, because you think of Syracuse, you think of Boston College, you think of Pitt, you think of Louisville, all those resonate here in the state. You also get high-profile games against like NC State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke. These are familiar schools because this is who UConn has been playing over the years on a regular basis. UConn's played Syracuse the last couple of years. Duke again this year, or last year, and they were on future schedules. North Carolina they got this year. I'm going to be putting out a show later. I'll put a quick preview of what that's going to be here. Here are some statistics. Let me pull down the comment. I did this interview with a gentleman by the name of Tony Altimore. This is a few years ago. This is before Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado joined. But just look at this. But this is just looking at fan base. From a fan base perspective, UConn's fan base is bigger than anything in the Big 12. UConn's fan base is pretty much on par with when the Pac-12 still existed. We're still pretty much there. Just behind the ACC. Another thing to point out, and I'll talk a lot more about that on that show. The other thing from a Big 12 standpoint, and again, this is Arizona State, BYU, and Colorado joining, as well as Utah. UConn, if they had joined, and you can see the list of schools here, would be the number one school academically. It's number 3 market. It's number 2 hoops program. You could probably say UConn's probably the number 1 hoops program potentially now. You can have that discussion with Kansas all you want. UConn brings a tremendous amount to the Big 12. I have the same breakdown for the ACC, and we'll go through that later this week. But all this to say, UConn deserves to be in a power conference. You just look at, do they belong with these schools over here, or do they belong with these schools over here? Do they belong with the Big 12 and the ACC and the Big 10, or do they belong down here with the American who has this level of fan support, or the other G3 conference, or UMass, who everyone loves to compare UConn to from a football playing standpoint? Remember when all those, they struggled? UConn's UMass. Well, no, they're not. Here's the proof. All this other thing. So, yeah, they belong in the Power 4. I think eventually it's going to happen here in the not too distant future. Knock on wood is my speculation. I'm not reporting anything on this show, but I expect something to happen here sooner rather than later, certainly ahead of any new TV deal negotiations. And I think that will be, and I hope it's the ACC. I hope ultimately the Big 10 is something that's an option down the line, way into the future. I know there were conversations way back when Rutgers first went. UConn was in conversations at that same time, and there was some hope at that point. But then obviously the Big East fell apart and things went south. But I think UConn's very far from the Big 10 at the moment. All right, next question from Josh Lafferty. What's your record prediction for the team this year? Ooh. Bobby, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
This is the thing that I have not answered yet. I think it's tough.
And if you want to save it for your show, save it for your show.
No.
I'm
not
ready to say either. I need to see some things.
Yeah, I agree. I have to I have to see some things before I'm gonna come out and say like definitively is this a 8-win team? Is it a 6-win team? I definitely think this is a bowl team though. I don't question that at all. If what I'm leaning right now is 8-4. But like you, I need to see a couple things before I am just ready to say like this is my prediction. This is what I think is going to happen. We'll see. But right now, if you told me what do I got to say, I'm going to say 8-4.
I'll answer the question. I'm not going to give you a prediction yet. There's so much new. I know Jason Candle's track record. I know the talent. I know what I think is depth. Not having seen it in person, with the schedule they have, it's just tremendous uptick from last season. I will say. I know UConn did play Duke, and it was ultimately the ACC champion and all that. I know they went to Syracuse. I know they went up to Boston College. I just feel like end to end, this is a much more difficult schedule. You've got a college football playoff participant in James Madison, who I know is not going to be the same. Their head coach is now, he's at UCLA now, right?
Yeah.
So James Madison's not going to be the same team either. But with so much new, I think it's an uptick from a schedule standpoint. I don't know what to expect yet. And usually at this time of year, I'm ready to say what I think from a record standpoint. Usually we have some semblance of who's playing where and what the depth chart's going to look like, but I can't even tell you who's starting on the defensive line. I can't tell you who the starting safeties are. I can't tell you the starting corners. I can't tell you the starting running backs. Although I probably could tell you Kenji Christian's going to get some carries, but I don't know who's lining up at wide receiver. And if I don't know that, I can't predict yet. I can't. Usually I'm very optimistic. Usually I'm saying top end of what my range is going to be is what I'm going to say is going to be the prediction. But for this, maybe I'll just say, hey, bowl is on the table. I think you have a lot of momentum. I think Jason Candle and his staff proved that they brought in a lot of talent. But I got to see it for myself because I've been very vocal in the past about recruiting rankings and offer lists. And just because a player is highly rated and has offers from certain schools doesn't mean a player that doesn't have those offers can't become and develop into something bigger and better than that type of player. Just look at how UConn's developed players and had a pipeline to the NFL for so long. So what I see and hear, I'm very optimistic. I got to see it for myself before I put a prediction out there. But I would say, coming off of what Jim Mora did with this program and Jason Candle coming in and what his experience is and his track record and expecting to build off of that momentum, it would definitely be a disappointment if UConn's not back in a bowl game next season. That's how I'll answer that. Before the season, I'll put a prediction out there because I'll have a chance to see these guys more than once. But for now, we'll just say bowl game or bust. All right. In your opinion, do you think this is a complete rebuild or a season where they finish that? There are no more rebuilds in college football. There are no more rebuilds in college sports. When you have so much money funneling in, when you have up to $20 million to spend on teams, when you have a transfer portal where you're competing and paying players to come in and win right away, there are no rebuilds. And this isn't a rebuild either. This is a build upon. This is not a situation where UConn is firing a coach and have just gone 2-10 or 3-9. You're not rebuilding anything from scratch. You're leveraging guys like Matt Hoffman and Ty Chan, who have been here and know the culture that was here at UConn, and adding to what the culture was that was here, because what they had here was positive, was strong. It got UConn to the most successful last 2 seasons in the history of the program in back-to-back 9-win seasons. So I'm not going to say it's a rebuild because it's not. They got to build off of what this program was at when Jim Mora left. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. Like you said, we don't need to rebuild because of we're looking, like you said, to build upon what we've done, and we hired a coach that can absolutely 100% do that, and he has a track record of doing that. When he took over Toledo, it wasn't a rebuild either. It was the same type of situation where he was trying to do what Matt Campbell was doing and build upon that. And I think that's the exact same thing that is being done here.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think this one is a little harder in a couple reasons. One, he was part of the Matt Campbell staff at Toledo. So he had, but a lot of staff members did leave. And Jason Candle was one of only a few that did stick around. The other thing is you didn't have so many guys transfer out then, as you see these days. So it is a tough job. I'm not going to say it isn't a tough situation to walk into, and maybe it's not fair to put expectations that, hey, you got to be back in a bowl game this year. I think the staff would be absolutely disappointed beyond belief if they don't. But they are entering a situation that is kind of unusual in this day and age of college sports and college football. It's the first time J.C. Candle's had to rely so heavily on the portal. He's got to, just like we talked about, Jim Mora had to roll the dice and get it right in the portal. He knows what he's bringing from Toledo because he's been there with them. He knows what he can lean on from the players coming from Toledo. The ones that he's bringing in from the transfer portal, it's more of a risk. Now, I do know a lot of the players that he is bringing in, he did recruit at the high school level too. So it's not like a net new, hey, we're forming relationships. Come to UConn, I'm coming here. No, they've had relationships develop. We've talked to a number of transfers that had an existing relationship with him already and the staff. So it's not like they're bringing guys in that they've never talked to before, but at the same time, it is a risk that you haven't seen these guys on an every single day basis the last couple of years. And how are these players from all these different schools going to come in and live? And because it's not just on the football field, it's also how does everybody get along off the field? That's a big part of a team as well. It's not just, hey, we're on the field between these hashes on the field for these 60 minutes. It's all right. How's the locker room morale? How do you handle situations that arise where there's conflict amongst the team? And that's where the leadership council comes in to help manage that. Because if you think that even the best teams don't have issues with 100 players, teenagers and young 20s, there's conflicts. So the best teams are ones that can resolve issues and have that togetherness from a team standpoint. And I think Jason Candle I'm just going to lean in on his track record again, that I got to trust what he's done. It's not somebody coming in that's never done this before and never coached a team. He's got a track record, but he's got expectations, and that's unusual for a new coach coming to UConn. And I go back to what I said about Maryland being the biggest game of the year. I don't want to put pressure on the team, but it's so critical that they perform well to keep the interest level that was built up here by the end of Jim Mora leaving, because I know Jim Mora was very disappointed with the lack of sellouts. I know he was that got to him, that we've turned this thing around. Why aren't people showing up? And it's a lack of understanding of who the fan base is, that if you're not playing the top level of talent and you're not winning consistently, yeah, you might be 8-2 or 9-3, but you're playing UAB, which means nothing to the average person here in the state of Connecticut. So you got to take advantage of the opportunities that you have, and it's why that early game against Maryland, I think, it's so critical. Let's keep going with the comments. Bobby, it's 11:45. If you got to jump, I'll stay, but if you got to jump, feel free.
We're good. We're good.
All right, we'll keep going. We just answered this question. I just hit it again. Joshua Alexander, UConn is better than Boston College in football and basketball. No reason why we shouldn't be in the ACC. I agree. Now, the thing is, you couldn't say UConn is better than Boston College in football even when UConn was in the same conference in the Big East with Boston College. I think the landscape of college athletics today has helped contribute to this situation. In addition to some things that Boston College has done internally and how they manage the athletic department and things of that nature. But Boston College is a private school. UConn is the state institution of Connecticut and is backed by the state government. They're able to compete. Their brand is bigger. They're able to, I'm not saying Boston College doesn't have the money, but there's a lot more interest in a state institution like UConn. And I think when we introduce money and NIL and all that to the table, I think that's why you're seeing UConn rise up above some of these private institutions. And I think it's also a factor in realignment that is overlooked, that UConn is a state-run institution. And it's not the small private city school. And it's not a Duke or a Boston College. I'm not saying Duke's going to be more than successful, no doubt about it. But if you look at a school like even Syracuse or a school like Pitt or a school like UMass, or although they are state-run, they're not the brand of a University of Connecticut. So, but I agree, yes, they should be in the ACC. There's also been a change of leadership at Boston College, which might hopefully mend some fences that with some of the issues that have been there in the past. The new leadership at Boston College, my understanding, is much more focused on athletics, and might be supportive of an addition of UConn to the ACC this time around. Any comments from you on Boston College, Bobby?
They might be the worst Power 4 football team in the country this year. I don't think that's like out of the question for them. With that said, they have fumbled a lot of things like you laid out, and they've put themselves in the position that they're in. There's been other things, of course, too, but their doings have really put themselves in this situation to where they're having to do like the changes that they've made are absolutely necessary, but they have to do this to even stay competitive, though. That's the thing. Whereas, like you said, our brand almost sells itself from a perspective of like when people see this, they know who you're talking about,
mm-hmm.
and they know who and what this is. Whereas other programs, the private and even public, people don't know. Like our brand speaks for itself.
Yep. And I've heard UConn's a basketball school. UConn plays basketball. Yes, they do, and they dominate. There's not a negative. That should not be a negative connotation. Basketball school, football school, who cares? Whatever UConn plays, in the right situation, on a level playing field, they perform. They perform better than any other, for the most part, the vast majority of even Power 4 institutions. If you look back at how successful UConn was in the Big East days, outperforming every school in the Big 10, or the Big 12, not named Texas or Oklahoma. Whether it's on the field, wins, developing players to the NFL. So when you raise that shirt, yeah, somebody might immediately think, oh, basketball. That's a good thing. It means you're accomplishing something. It means you're resonating. It means your brand is out there and strong. And it's not just men's basketball. It's women's basketball as well. Having a great women's basketball team that's dominated is not a negative. It's a positive. It's an additive to your conference. Having the most successful men's basketball program since 1999 is not a negative. It's a positive. It's an additive to your conference. The New York, Connecticut market adds opportunity if you're the Big 12 for marketing deals and revenue. I still can't believe UConn's not in the Power 4 conference, but I will say it's going to happen here. Oh, we just talked about this, actually. Rangers King. I did not see this comment when I was talking, but what's your assessment of how BC would vote? Yes, they did get a new president. Athletic focus. I do think, and listen, a lot of people in Connecticut that I grew up with, a lot of UConn students also know people that went to Boston College. Students would want Boston College and UConn in the conference together. We went to high school with people that went to BC, and we have a friendly rivalry with Boston College. Sometimes it's not so friendly. We hate the school. We hate the institution. We like our friends. That's what makes college sports, is to be able to have rivalries with people you know and hang out with and grew up with. It's what makes it passionate. And that's also why I want the ACC, because it's not just Boston College. We know people that are Syracuse people here in the state of Connecticut, just because of the proximity in the region. We lost that in the AAC when they went to, if you can't see it, the A's up there for the American. It wouldn't be the same situation in the Big 12 because everybody knows, hey, UConn, Arizona, UConn, Kansas, those are matchups people want to see in their marquee. When UConn went and joined that conference back in the day, it was UConn, even Houston being successful now. I don't get up for a UConn-Houston matchup, but rest assured I would be up for a UConn-Arizona matchup and a UConn-Kansas matchup. So when I hear a lot out there of, hey, we tried this before with the AAC, it's not going to work, the travel, this and that. The Big 12 is not the AAC. The Big 12 is not going to have 1,000 people at your basketball conference tournament. The Big 12 is not going to have football stadiums, the like of Temple, filling it up with 5,000 in Lincoln Financial Field where the Eagles play in front of 70,000 on a regular basis. It's not going to be a barren stadium. You go to Kansas State, sell out. You go to Iowa State, sell out. You go to Kansas, sell out. You go to any other place in the Big 12, it's going to be a fun environment that's going to move the needle because it's the top end of college sports. So I don't view, I know there's some within the state. I know there's some that are in state government, including senators that have been vocal every time the Big 12 gets brought up, that thinks it would be a mistake to leave the Big East. I completely disagree because the Big 12 is not the American. This comment's about Boston College. I don't know why I'm talking about the Big 12. Let's keep moving. I am not as inflated on the perception of UConn football's performance in the 2000s, even the best of times, talking 8 to 9 wins and 5-2 in conference, getting clobbered against ranked teams. Well, Bobby, were you following UConn football in the 2000s? Because I can go on.
No, yeah, I mean, I this would be a conversation more for you. I mean, I can speak like from the historical aspect, but that's not necessarily my wheelhouse. I didn't officially start kind of covering the team until 2021, honestly.
Okay. All right. I could take this one. Yes, UConn finished with 8 and 9 wins. Not even 9. 8 and 4. No, they had a year that they were 9 and 3 and then lost the bowl game in Wake Forest. I think they finished 9 and 4. But it's the games, it's the out of conference, it's the going to Notre Dame and winning in South Bend. It's going to Michigan. It's going to the first ever bowl game. It's playing Wake Forest down in Charlotte when you brought 22,000 fans with you to Charlotte, North Carolina for a bowl game. It was producing NFL player after NFL player after NFL player. You're in secondary in the late 2000s. Darius Butler, Tyvon Branch, Robert McClain, Bleedy Ray Wilson, Dwayne Gratz, Byron Jones. These are all guys that went to the NFL. The talent level that was there was through the roof. When they went up against juggernaut all-world West Virginia teams that should have won a national championship with Pat White, they had that hiccup at Pitt in the backyard brawl. UConn was up against them for the Big East championship one year and got absolutely blown out because West Virginia was just on another tier, on another level. They were an elite program back then. But UConn was competitive across the board those years. And they are one of only a handful of schools, maybe a dozen schools, maybe 20 schools at the most, that during that run had multiple, even shares of a BCS conference championship. They were in the same grouping as an Auburn and a Florida and an LSU and a Michigan and Ohio State and a Penn State. Those were their peers from a production and success standpoint. The Big East was very competitive at the same time. So all that played in. And then I think there is also a nostalgia moment, a first moment, this is a net new thing moment for the state of Connecticut, where UConn, out of nowhere, decided to build this stadium and took the chance that people were going to show up. And you went from overnight playing 16,000 seat stadium on campus to this 40,000 seat pristine stadium at the time. Still is. It's one of the newest, still one of the top 20 newest stadiums in all of college football. So when I hear about facilities and stadiums, that's the reason why UConn shouldn't be in a power conference. Ridiculous. But everybody took to it. It was sold out immediately. UConn, Indiana, the first ever game, sold out. But no fans went away because they loved the experience, because they came back and saw UConn take on Boston College in a close game. They saw them beat Rutgers at home. The very next year, host Pitt in the first ever Big East game under the lights in an epic environment that rivals any environment from a basketball standpoint that UConn's ever had. Those are memories that are built. And for those that were around at that time, it speaks to why there's such an affinity to that time period. Because we were watching something be built into this championship type team that won a Big East title before Randy Edsall departed in 2010. From the ground up, we saw this thing build, and we were all a part of it. Anybody that was at the university, anybody that was watching the program at the time. And it's why those of us that were here, and for my wife's a teacher, and I know people were born in 2004 are now out of college already. It's crazy to me. It's crazy. There are people that are out of college right now that didn't see the football stadium open and didn't see UConn play Pitt for the first time and didn't see UConn win a championship, a Big East Conference championship, or go to the Fiesta Bowl, or you name it. And then what transpired was futility and the worst possible situation that no other athletic department was really faced with, where you've been a basketball playing member of one of the top conferences going back to the 80s. You upgrade your football program. You get to a point where you're winning that. You're winning national championships across the board in all sports. And then the rug's pulled out from under you. And you go from the top level of competition to a lower level against teams, we just talked about the American, that nobody had an affinity to. Meanwhile, anybody else that got left behind viewed the American still as an upgrade, because when the American was created, they had to expand the remaining leftover playing members of the Big East, who was like Rutgers and Louisville and some others. All teams that ultimately ended up going to the ACC or the Big Ten. And UConn was left with other schools that viewed the American as this big-time opportunity for their athletic department to continue to grow, where UConn was really the only institution in all of conference realignment that got downgraded. And it had a tremendous impact from not just from a financial standpoint, but a morale standpoint among the fan base, from an interest level, from an attendance level, from an investment level in this state, to the point where you had government officials wondering if UConn should have a football program. No other school faced this type of situation. And the only rival I can think of is what recently happened to Oregon State and Washington State. And I guarantee you, even in this NIL era, I feel like they're going to go through some of the same struggles. Now, the thing with them is they've been able to surround themselves in the Pac-12 with schools that they've historically played, like a Boise State, or schools that are close to them. Whereas UConn was on this island, not just on an island, but on an island with schools that have been historically below them, which created a situation that those that grew up in the 2010s experienced. So when we look back at the 2000s, compared to where we've been, absolutely spectacular. So I think that's why people talk so highly of the mid-2000s. That was a long answer. All right, let's keep going. With UConn recently, and we're at midnight, so I see we still have a consistent amount of listeners, so we'll keep going as long as I'm going to cut it by 12:30 if we're still here because I got to work tomorrow. But Bobby, feel free to jump anytime you want. With UConn recently receiving land grant university status, would they be a sleeper candidate for the Big Ten with the passage of peace? I don't. I wish they were, but I don't think so. Not at this stage.
The one thing that I know that they're working towards is the AAU accreditation, which is not the Big Ten doesn't say you have to have it, but every member of the Big Ten has had that when they've been accepted into the conference. Nebraska no longer is an AAU accreditation university, but everybody else is.
Yeah.
So I know we're working on that, but the ACC also wants that too. Again, it's not a requirement, but it's something that they want because you're on the same level as your peer institutions. So I know that it's going to help. That's for sure. It's definitely not going to hurt us.
Yeah. Sleeper candidate, I don't think any chance at this moment in time. Now, say Jason Candle runs off 5, 6, 7, 8 years of spectacular football here with UConn. They keep winning. They keep investing on the education side. Could there be an opportunity there? I don't know. And I also don't know what the rest of the landscape of college athletics would look like. But at this time, 0.0001% chance of happening. I will never say never, but Rutgers is in the Big Ten. I will never say never. Let's keep moving. But this go around with NIL and ACC juice, they absolutely could be a top third ACC football program if they wanted to be. You already said it. Sleeping giant. Sky's the limit for UConn football. They never reached their full potential, even with Randy Edsall. They haven't reached their full potential with Jim Mora. And I think Jason Candle is the perfect coach to take this, continue the consistency, and see where he really can take this program. And if you give him the resources in a Power 4 conference, his track record in the MAC speaks for itself. Just imagine not just Jason Candle, but imagine UConn plus Jason Candle with resources, the likes of a Florida State or a Louisville or a Pitt or a Syracuse. And I've heard some comments recently, especially this week after I put out that video on Friday. Well, Syracuse hasn't had success, and BC hasn't had success, and Pitt hasn't had success. They haven't been the same programs as they were in the Big East. Well, they're also not state institutions. UConn is not Syracuse. UConn is not Boston College. UConn is not Pittsburgh. And nothing against those schools. Pitt has been the most successful, especially on the football side, of any of those schools that have gone on. I will say Louisville has had success there too, but not on basketball. I think all those schools took a step back from a basketball perspective for different reasons than when they were in the Big East. But I just view UConn, and even Louisville's not a state institution. UConn would be set up for a significant amount of success that they would not have the same results as those other schools. And I think sky's the limit. UConn just beat last season the ACC champion. Lions again. I'm actually an Iowa guy, so I'll be selfish and hoping for the Big 12. But either way, ACC and Big 12, I'm excited. But do you guys think conference championships would be more realistic in the Big 12? I don't think. I would never put a cap or a lid or a ceiling on what UConn can become. I think they've proven over and over and over again, regardless of the sport, they will rise to the level of competition no matter where they're playing. They'll rise and they'll fall to the level of competition no matter where they're playing. I think they can win whatever conference they join. I think if you give them the amount of resources and the investment that's there, I see no reason why UConn football cannot accomplish what other sports at UConn have done. Big statement. I don't see why it can't happen. How can UConn join the ACC if they already have 19 teams? The new bill caps at 18. Someone has to leave. No. They currently have 17 full-time members, and then they have Notre Dame. And then what's crazy to me is that it would take something like the PCSA to add a team because they have odd numbers for a conference schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And different teams are playing different amounts of conference games each season, and there's different rules on how you can calculate who's going to be the conference winner from a tiebreaker standpoint, which is going to be disastrous. I can already foresee a 5-1
what could go wrong?
Team. Somebody's going to go 5-1 in conference or 6. What? Let's see. How many conference games are they playing? 9. Some conference teams are going to play 9 games. Others are going to play 10. Somebody's going to go 8-1. Somebody's going to go 8-2. The 8-2 team is going to get the nod over the 8-1 team, and there's going to be absolute chaos from school leadership and coaches trying to figure out how an 8-1 team got left out of a conference championship game over against an 8-2 team, because the tiebreaker would be if you're 8-2 and you're a higher ranked team, you're going to go over the team that's 8-1 and lower ranked. Is my understanding of what that is. A UConn addition, even without the PCSA, would resolve any issues there and put everyone back on a level playing field. So the fact that they didn't add UConn already, it just shows how stubborn that conference is. But I don't think they did so because I think that would have further expedited Florida State's and Clemson's departure. Now, Florida State and Clemson are stuck and need to make more money, and UConn brings more money. I think it's a no-brainer that UConn would be added. But there's room. There's currently room. There's room for one more. And if Florida State Florida State used to be an independent before they joined the ACC. They probably, if their ultimate goal is the SEC, they spent a whole heck of a lot of money in courts battling the legal language in the grant of rights of the ACC bylaws to be able to challenge and try to lower their exit fee, which they did, to be able to leave. So I think Florida State would do whatever they need to do to leave a situation, even if it is going independent in 5 years. Would Clemson do the same potentially? And if Clemson and Florida State do so, would others follow? I don't know, but there's only so many schools that can move, and that opens up further opportunities for UConn as well. Rangers K, you got a lot of comments here. We're going to blow through some of these because we are getting late here. Assuming Notre Dame counts in this legislation, we kind of just talked about that. All right, small private schools and big cities have been expanding their athletic footprint lately. Vandy in particular, but even Northwestern. It's the SMU and TCU, BC administrative. Yeah, I mean, You're going to go as your leadership goes as well. So if you have good leadership, you might be able to navigate. SMU has a very good football coach in Rhett Lashley, who UConn fans know well. He was offensive coordinator here for a year. Gordon Samus, I'm interested to see how he does as OC down at TCU. That's another one there. I don't know. Maybe it's just a Northeast thing with Syracuse and Pitt then, and BC. I don't know. But BC's administration has been terrible for athletics. Go ahead, Bobby.
I will say, like, living here in Illinois from the Northwestern perspective, like, I think being in the Big Ten plays a part in this as well. But like, yeah, absolutely, just a little. Plus, you have an institution that is focused on getting their athletic department to where they need to be. Like, they're just built a brand new stadium. It's beautiful. Opening in October against Penn State. But at the same time, like, this is an institution that is one of the premier institutions, but at the same time, they put money into athletics to get to where they want to be. And so I think that SMU's done that as well, but SMU's had great coaches too, which has really helped them get to where they want to be. So I think it's potentially a little bit different situation from like the BC perspective, where they haven't had the level of coaches or the level of leadership either.
Yeah. And that brand new stadium, it looks pristine, by the way, at Northwestern.
Yeah.
That's true. That would be a good out of conference matchup for UConn, I feel like.
Yep. I agree. Let's make it happen.
I agreed. Danielle, if all you're saying is true, why hasn't UConn been invited yet? I'll believe it when I say it. Well, listen, I will be too. I've been jaded. I have a lot of ill will and ill feelings towards the ACC that would go away immediately if we got an invite. I think the Big 12 is acting slowly, and I think it's going to cost them an opportunity. I think the commissioner of the Big 12 over and over and over again has been pushing UConn to join the conference, but it's the school presidents and the chancellors that make the decision. And they believed, at least, based on all the information we've heard and the conversations we've had, the presidents and chancellors believed the ACC was going to be falling apart in the not too distant future, and they wanted to wait to see exactly who they could pull in from the ACC and pair with UConn or add over UConn. But if you introduce a situation where ACC teams are not going to be able to be pulled because there's restrictions on being able to leave the conference and have to sit as an independent for 5 seasons, that changes the story completely. I think that then gives Yormark the ability to go back to the presidents and chancellors to get a yes vote, because it's not been once, it hasn't been twice, it hasn't been 3 times that Yormark has gone back to try to get UConn in. It's been consistent. And there's value there. We know consultants have been sharing the value of adding a UConn to the conference. What that would do from a revenue standpoint with marketing deals by pulling in New York. And they have all the valuations. When it comes down to it, it is about money. And if schools can't be added, any conference is going to be looking to add in as much money as possible. And UConn has all the information. The Big 12 has all the information of what a UConn addition would bring. They wanted to slow play it to see what would transpire with the ACC. But if the ACC is closed for business, then here sits UConn. And that's how I see it playing out. Is that how it will play out? It doesn't mean it's going to 100% happen, but that's how my assessment of the current situation, in addition to knowing conversations have been happening since they said publicly that there's a pause between the Big 12 and UConn. ACC, more ACC comments. We're talking way too much ACC on here. I still have ill will to them. We're going to keep moving. We're talking SMU. I can relate to all historical amnesia in football. SMU faced it for over 30 years. Yeah, that's another school, right? That got downgraded. 100%. Political obstacles: Baylor, Houston, TCU, Texas Tech. face some cues. Bobby, you want to talk about any of these? I'm gonna keep moving.
Well, one thing I'll say is like from a Big 12 perspective is like I had a former coach on the previous staff that told me the Big 12 thing was going to happen. Now, right as that was told to me is when the Pac-12 imploded.
Yep.
So then when those things transpire, of course they're adding the Pac-12 teams, which then leaves us out in that regard. So now the things that you're saying, I agree with. Like the Big 12 is going to lay low just to see what else happens here, and that's why nothing else has really happened or transpired. But trust me, Dave Benedict and many others are having these conversations for sure.
Yes. UConn was the +1 with Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Had the pack not disintegrated, had the pack not completely muffed their TV deal negotiations, the commissioner did not think the Pac-12 was going to fall apart and all these schools were going to have options. And yeah, that had an impact on Jim Mora as well, I will say.
Yes.
I had some conversations with him.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him publicly about it. I talked to him off the record about it as well. He thought they were in. As you just mentioned, it was going to happen. And I think even there's been comments maybe right after that transpired that even Iowa State said UConn was the school that we were adding with Colorado. But then here came Arizona State, Utah to the table. And that's the path that they went. So it's been, if something bad can happen to keep UConn out, imagine something happening. It's happened. And and I think that's why so many fans react the way they do when realignment news comes up, because we are jaded. It's happened so many times. It's been rumored so many times that, hey, it's been rumored so many times and it's been real stories out there, but then nothing ever happens. And here's UConn still fighting and competing on a national scale with one arm time behind their back from a revenue standpoint, still producing year after year after year. That's at some point that is going to go a long way to showcase to conferences of what value can UConn bring to the table, not just off the field, but from a competitive standpoint on the field and on the court as well. Okay, maybe I'm misspeaking there about Pitt and Louisville, but I don't know. I'm not going to comment. If I'm misspeaking, I will look into that and I will see if I'm incorrect. But Pitt is not the University of Pennsylvania or Penn State University. So do they get state funding? Maybe. I'll check. I'll take a look. They could get city funding from the city of Pittsburgh, but unsure. Are you aware? This is more in your neck of the woods.
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving. Toledo fans feel like this is one thing that I did hear, but I look big picture when I'm assessing coaches, because it is the MAC. It's not like it is the ACC. It's not like it's the Big 12. I think his ability to recruit, I think his ability to develop, I think the loyalty showed by players, I think the lack of any losing season speaks for itself. I'm willing to overlook lack of conference titles for consistency and for what I think he's going to be able to do here at UConn with more resources than what he had at Toledo. That's how I'll look at that. I'm not going to judge game day until I see game day. That's how I'll put that.
And one thing I'll add too is the MAC is Like the bottom of the MAC is what it is. Like there's some very bad teams at the bottom of it. But from the top to the middle to the mid bottom ish, let's say, the top 8 teams in that conference, there's not that big of a difference between team number 8 and team number 2 and 3, let's say. Whereas in a lot of other conference, there's a significant gap between teams. So the MAC is very, very competitive from top to, I'll say, bottom, even though we know the bottom is what it is. But the difference between going 8-4 and 4-8 in the MAC could be 10 points, literally. Like it's that close in that regard. So
yeah, agreed. All right, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more comments. All right, no more comments, guys, because we're gonna cut it here after we go through these final ones. Ranger King again. BC turned Al Skinner and Jeff. Complete disasters across the board. They had the coaches. Yeah, completely agree. I know some people that have been around in and around the BC program and was working with the BC basketball program when Al Skinner was there. The fact that he got let go was disastrous.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's nothing behind. The expansion of the ACC making the threshold 14-18 instead of 12-15 is huge for UConn's chances of getting in. I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. I think we exhausted that conversation. Arrow, UConn go undefeated. They make the playoffs with this schedule. If UConn goes undefeated, will they make the college football playoffs? If UConn goes undefeated, I will say yes, they will sneak in. I think they would. And the reason why I say that is I'll say this every year going forward, even if they continue to be an independent. I think there's a scenario where if they beat, say, James Madison goes and wins their conference, and they're the highest ranked G6 team, and UConn beats James Madison and has that win over James Madison. Yeah, James Madison is the highest ranked other group of 5 team to win a conference championship. I think there would be an opportunity to get UConn in. I do. Depends what else is out there. It depends how the rest of UConn's schedule performs in conference, probably. But if you go undefeated in a 12-team playoff, I think you get it. I do. Now, the 4-letter network would be talking nonstop about how UConn should not have any chance of sniffing the college football playoff, just like they did with some other schools in the past. No doubt about it. Kirk Herbstreit wouldn't be happy. I know that. Based on his comments about James Madison last year. But if you go undefeated, you got to be in it, right?
I mean, theoretically, yes, you should. I think, like you said, though, it comes down to what does everybody else do? How does the other teams on our schedule pan out? And then where are we when it comes to the rest of the quote-unquote group of 6 in the conference championships that come from that? I think it really just boils down to that. I mean, should you, if you go undefeated, should you? Absolutely.
Yep.
But I think it just boils down to what is the resume compared to other resumes.
Yeah. At 9-3 at the end of the year, UConn was getting votes in the AP poll and in the coaches poll. If they were 12-0, they absolutely would have been ranked. They probably would have been right on in the middle of the top 25, I would assume, at 12-0. Move up, 12 spots to the top, to number 13? Yes. I will say this emphatically. Yes, if they go undefeated, they'll be in the playoffs. And if they don't, you'll hear me on this mic. I will say.
Mine too.
It would be a good problem to have, I will say. All right. Big 12 doesn't even have the conference. This is the last comment of the night. Let me actually click it. Rangers King again. Appreciate the comments. Appreciate the interaction. And appreciate. Listen, it's been consistent viewership here for the last couple of hours. So thank you all for sticking around. Big 12 doesn't even have the conference network to capitalize on the New York and Connecticut market. Q's and UConn rivalry. That would be in the ACC, which would be on the ACC network. Hey, and who knows? If the ACC ultimately fell apart, if the Big 12 ultimately gets a TV deal with ESPN, would then the ACC network then become the Big 12 network? That could be something. And then you get additional carriage fees and you get additional revenue from that standpoint. I know that's making the ACC a lot of money. So if the ACC ultimately fell apart and Syracuse and UConn joined the Big 12, I think there would probably be a network associated with that. All right. It's August 5th. Camp opens today, UConn Nation. How's that feel, Bobby? We got football to talk about.
Let's go.
All right. I got to do a quick close. That's going to do it for today's show, obviously. We will definitely be back here on Locked On UConn tomorrow with more football coverage. We'll talk and see if there's anything put out from a UConn perspective out there on social media. We will definitely review, even if it's a couple highlights. So we'll talk about it here on the show, and we will certainly have a full breakdown on tomorrow's Locked On UConn. But for now, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On UConn. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On UConn so you can get all the latest episodes across social media. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On College Basketball with Andy Patton and Isaac Shade. As we continue this week, camp opens tomorrow. If there's anything with the PCSA, we will come on and talk about it. We have to talk a little UConn men's basketball tomorrow as well. Not just Dan Hurley's comments. We also have new offers out there that we have to get to. We're going to try to get Nikisha Sales on and talk UConn women's basketball as well. Before we go, Bobby, 2 hours, 26 minutes. Thank you. Appreciate it. I know you're like me. We've got kids, so I appreciate you taking some time and hopping in here. I know you're Midwest, though. It's only 11:30 there, right?
Only, yeah.
There you go.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I really, really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we do this during the season. Bring you back and well, I think we'll definitely talk at least for one segment, 10 minutes. We'll bring you back before the season opener after we get a chance to check out practice. We'll bring you back on the show. But listen, I appreciate you taking 2.5 hours out of your day.
Absolutely.
To hop in and talk UConn football. Listen,
Thank
I think
you
that
again.
speaks to where we are as a program. We've got listeners consistently listening in after midnight, ready to talk about UConn football. And we have multiple podcasters talking about UConn football for 2.5 hours on a Wednesday night in August. UConn football is back.
I didn't think that would happen in 2021.
Yeah, agreed. That's how we're going to end it for today. Once again, this is Matt Schonvisky, Locked On UConn. Until next time, see ya!